Welcome to Ecosystem North. I'm Jamie Sunsbach. Each week, Ecosystem North shines a spotlight on the people and organizations that support our region's entrepreneurs, uncovering the real story of what inspires and drives them to be entrepreneurial champions. So before I start, I want to take a step back in time. So I started my work in the entrepreneurial ecosystem of Rochester a little over 8 years ago. I looked around the city of Rochester for someone that was doing similar work, but really just couldn't find someone who was 100% committed to the work as I felt I was. Most were just entrepreneurs volunteering and helping as best they could, but they had a venture to pursue. So I started looking elsewhere, and through some connections, I found our next guest. I'm very proud to call her a friend and fellow entrepreneurial instigator. At first here in the region with all the great work she did with Red Wing Ignite, and then ultimately with the state's entrepreneurial ecosystem. So please welcome Neela Mollgaard, Executive Director of Launch Minnesota. Welcome.
Hi, Jamie. It's such a pleasure and honor to be here with you. And yes, you are a friend, and I think the world of you and the work that you do for the Rochester area.
Well, I think,
Minnesota.
Yeah, well, thank you. I definitely think that there were way back in the day, which was probably about 8 years ago, there were very few people doing this sort of work. In fact, this field was, what I now call ecosystem building was pretty new. It really didn't have a title. So, it's fun to find one of the pioneers, especially in our region. And I'm just glad that we've continued to do this great work and continue to push forward.
Yes, one of the benefits of this work is being able to work with people like you. And I recall a conversation we had years and years ago where you shared that you thought the word ecosystem builder would be used as frequently as a project manager would be. Do you remember that?
Yeah, that came out of I think an eShip summit I attended in Kansas City, where they were saying, we should legitimize this profession. This is a profession. It's not necessarily economic development, but I think it's a very important piece that feeds into, I would say, modern economic development. So definitely saying, a lot of these roles are taken on by great people in maybe as a side hustle in a way from their job, say at EDA or a nonprofit. This really should be a core piece to every community's strategy for creating great businesses. We've always had this strategy of retaining, or you're trying to bring new businesses to town, and there's so much money and time spent on those things. And if we could just take a tiny bit of that and home grow a lot of these new ventures, I think you would see just an amazing wealth of prosperity for the community.
I obviously agree. So does the state. I mean, this is going to be one of the, we need to focus on the full spectrum of businesses, right? From the emerging businesses to the well-established. And we definitely need a strong, innovative ecosystem to help start and scale those early stage businesses.
So before we talk more on that, I'd like to know a little bit more about your background and what brought you to this profession of ecosystem building.
Well, I grew up in the Twin Cities, a suburb of the Twin Cities. My father actually came to the United States from India for graduate school, met my mom and never returned to India, even though they had an arranged marriage waiting for him there. And then after high school, I left Minnesota to advance my education and my careers. But when we knew we wanted to maybe start a family and call someplace home, I quickly looked at returning to the great state of Minnesota. So my husband and I looked all over Minnesota of where we should go, and we were really drawn to Red Wing. It's a small town on the Mississippi River, about 45 minutes from Rochester. We love the scenic beauty, the bluffs, and the great hiking and mountain biking and downhill skiing and trails. And so we started our family here, and I can't believe it, but it's already been almost 20 years that we've been in this community.
Wow. So I know you know this, but I was actually born in Red Wing, and I was adopted basically at about, I think it's about 3 weeks of age. So I've never I don't have any memories of Red Wing. And for some reason, when I moved to the region here in Rochester, I was just like, I don't want to go to Red Wing because I was afraid I was going to run into a biological relative of mine. So it really took you, Neela, to get me to Red Wing the first time because I was just like, oh, I'm scared to go. But it's funny how our upbringings really cause us to focus in on areas maybe that we wouldn't have thought of when we're younger and we're going to live in big cities doing big
Yeah.
things. And I think that's the beauty of our region is you can have that big city experience, but you don't necessarily have to live in the middle of it. And that's what I love about Minnesota.
Yeah, I had always lived in bigger cities prior to coming to Red Wing. I had never lived in a small town, and so it's still 20 years later. There's definitely so many wonderful reasons why a small town adds such value to their residents. But yes, I was usually used to big cities. My husband loved small towns. He'd loved been like helicoptered into his land, right? And so Red Wing was a great compromise in between the Twin Cities and Rochester with the plethora of arts and education and outdoor recreation. So
I guess the next question is, what caused you to get involved in the entrepreneurial world? What were the steps kind of leading up to that and really, making the massive dive into ecosystem building?
There's no straight path, right? In anyone's career journey, there's a lot of turns, but they, when you reflect back, they were all for a reason. And in every career I've had, every volunteer position I've had, every initiative I've worked on, you gain insight, experience, knowledge, meet some interesting people. So really, when I reflect back, really all my careers have been involved bringing people together to drive change, improve individuals, businesses, and communities. I was on another panel earlier this year, and someone shared, kind of her philosophy, and I'm gonna steal that too. But she said she loves doing good things with good people, and I think that just really nails what excites me and what motivates me and drives me to continue to do the work I do. I've worked in corporate, in government, in nonprofits. They've all had kind of a common thread, and that is kind of coming up with new innovative solutions to solve problems. And so even in the corporate setting, it was starting a new, national initiative that didn't exist prior, based in communities, did the same thing. There was a need in our community, and, developed a solution to solve those problems. And so, it's maybe more of an intrapreneur than an entrepreneur, but that has been a consistent piece of the work I've done.
So I know your journey eventually led you to Red Wing Ignite. Was Red Wing Ignite around before you started, or is that something that you worked to create?
Yeah, I was privileged enough to work with a great group of people and helped found that organization. So what happened was the city of Red Wing was very forward-thinking. It's a rural community, but it's forward-thinking. And they knew the importance of broadband, even before COVID-19. And so they implemented gigabit broadband here years ago. The provider of that broadband service was Hiawatha Broadband Communications. And they nominated our city to be a partner with US Ignite. US Ignite was at that time just founded by the White House and the National Science Foundation under President Obama. And the whole mission of that organization was to keep the US globally competitive by developing new technologies. So Red Wing was one of 25 cities in the nation that was a partner to US Ignite. There was no dollars involved, but 25 other thriving cities that we could learn from, right, and be part of that network. And an important mission. Red Wing was the smallest city by far. The next largest city was Kansas City. But we knew at that time, I don't think we named it at that time. That was back in like 2012. But we had to find a path to keep rural communities competitive. And this was definitely the way. There's a lot of people that want to live in greater Minnesota. And we can still stay competitive here in greater Minnesota. So we spent about a year looking at best practices of these cities all across the nation. We looked at the great work happening already in Minnesota, the co-working spaces, some of the other accelerator programs and such. And after about a year, we realized there was something here that we really did need to pursue. We had to leverage gigabit broadband and the partnership with US Ignite. Now, in Kansas City, Google had hit and everyone was flocking to Kansas City to be with Google. We probably thought that could happen with our gigabit broadband, but I think we were being overly optimistic. There was not a flood to Red Wing because of our connectivity. But at that time, we thought we were going to make this a nonprofit and make a go of it. And I threw my name in the hat at that time to help lead that organization. And so Red Wing Ignite really is an organization that supports entrepreneurs and businesses and students to succeed in the 21st century economy. We started with entrepreneurs and trying to launch new technologies, partnering with US Ignite and others. Then we learned quickly we have to plant the seeds for the future, right? That we don't have maybe always enough entrepreneurs or innovative ideas right now to launch. So we did a lot of programming K through 12 and also integrated our college students. And then we also knew we needed to engage our corporate innovators and the businesses. We needed them as mentors. We needed them to help, with some maybe risk capital, right, for some investment opportunities, and also that understanding of the market for our emerging businesses. So really needed all three of those to see success, and that's what we worked on. So we kicked off Red Wing Ignite in 2013, and then I've left now about a year ago.
Yeah. So, building on that, I think you were the first person that I knew that a lot of the reading I had done. So Bradfeld Startup Communities, which came out in 2012, it was like the entrepreneurs must lead. So everything about this sort of startup community was the entrepreneurs lead. And so I sort of formed this stable of entrepreneurs around me. But what I quickly found is these entrepreneurs were very independent. They had sort of come up on their own with no help or support, although in hindsight, I totally think they did have help and support. They just didn't realize it. And they weren't very good at telling that story. But you were the first person I started to see, I would see you testifying before the legislature. I would see you going into other communities, reaching out to people like me. And starting a bigger conversation, trying to do, as you were saying, leverage an entire community to really raise these entrepreneurs. And I think I have to give you all the credit for being the one that sort of sparked this idea of, okay, it's not just 7 entrepreneurs in a community grumbling about how they get no support for anything. It's how do you reach out to your largest employers? How do you reach out to your educational system? And I really thank you, because you were really the one that taught me that. So, it's just been ever since that, it's been, boom.
We learn from each other, Jamie. Yep. But, I think a few points there. One is being a small town of 16,000 people, I realized very quickly that we did not have the density needed when you talk about talent and resources and people to properly launch a startup, right? And all the things that they need, from their customers to their investment dollars to events to highlight them to all of that. We were a great microcosm of the real world, right? So there was a lot of things that being in a small rural town, we have advantages for that others don't. But I quickly had to make those partnerships in different cities with different organizations to properly support and elevate the entrepreneurs we were trying to help succeed. So it was, what is that? Innovation's the mother of necessity. So, that is why, that was done out of necessity, but then really learned that was also kind of the way to create this model for rural innovation, is it was creating that density. Now that work, not everyone is like you, Jamie, and understands kind of like how working together kind of elevates everybody, organizations and entrepreneurs. You know, it's not natural to work with other organizations, other entrepreneurial support organizations that are in different communities, or that you're competing for grant dollars or sponsorship dollars or corporate sponsorship dollars for. But I think we really saw, especially in the Southeast region, kind of a coalescence of people and organizations wanting to put that entrepreneur at the center and wrapping our services around them to make them the most successful that they could be. And it was fun to do that with you and others in the Southeast.
Yeah, and I think, you know, now moving into your current position, I think that you help to bring that experience, that message, that story now to your role in the state. And was so exciting to me. I remember when I found out that you had accepted this position, your current position, I was just like, yes, you know, I think a lot of times what we've learned in Minnesota is, you know, obviously, and many times rightly, you know, it's very Twin Cities focused. It has been. And to bring a voice that isn't necessarily just from a Twin Cities focus, I thought was so exciting.
No, I think it's been very helpful in my past role, especially at Red Wing Ignite, because I played such different roles and worked with so many different stakeholder groups, right? I knew what it felt like to manage a co-working space. I knew what the pain points were for entrepreneurs, all that they sacrificed financially and with their time to launch their new innovations. I've worked with investors creating an angel fund and saw what worked, what didn't work, what was needed to increase risk capital in a community. And I just saw the passion that everyone had that really wanted to support these businesses succeed. And so I think playing those different roles and knowing the struggles both in Greater Minnesota and the Twin Cities really does help now with Launch Minnesota, when we work with startups directly, when we work with the entrepreneurial support agencies, when we continue to try to increase our risk capital amongst the state and grow our talent pool. I think in my past roles, I have been able to work side by these people and feel a better understanding of what works and what ways we as government can help elevate and enhance the work that they do. The goal of Launch for me is to serve all of those individuals. It's not about Launch Minnesota. The success of Launch Minnesota is if the Collider is successful, if Red Wing Ignite is successful, if Bemidji Launchpad is successful. We are here to serve you and try to help elevate and enhance the work that you do. And so I feel really so happy that I can still work with my colleagues from before and in this new capacity. And it's fun to see the state coming together. As you know, they just submitted a kind of a mid-year report with the Launch Minnesota Network, which you were a program partner of, and we're so thrilled to have you part of this statewide network, kind of a connective tissue across the state with 7 hubs and over 60 program partners across the state. Fun to see the connection. I really think it's where we launched in October, Launch Minnesota did. And so in about 9 months, 10 months, have gotten over 1.6 million out to startups. We've created this platform for success. I kind of think it's kind of a platform with all of our entrepreneurial support organizations, kind of a hub and spoke model across Minnesota. And now we're kind of reaching out to that third tier of trying to engage others to be more engaged in our startup community. And as you shared earlier, Jamie, the key parts of that are government and higher ed and our corporate innovators and our startup communities, right? And if those all work together well, we can have a really strong innovative ecosystem for Minnesota.
And obviously, this has been, I'm sure for you and all of us, this has been a challenging year. I don't think any of us quite expected all the challenges that we've faced as a world, as a society. And so what I've been asking a lot of people is, in the last 6 months, and I think you've sort of alluded to it in your last comments, but what's something that's a real bright spot in the last 6 months, even though we've endured, just some very, very stressful times, what's been a real bright spot for you in the work you're doing in the last 6 months that maybe people don't know about?
Yeah, I mean, we all have great stories to tell our grandchildren someday, living through 2020. There's so many bright spots. One, I think being part of state government right now has been fascinating to see how government has stepped in to help our businesses, to help our communities. I've really seen the servant leadership across Mindeed, across the state. Colleagues working endlessly to try to get some funding out to different businesses, and to try to address the needs, the dramatic needs right now that everyone is facing. So that's been really a privilege to be able to be working for state government now and seeing that role that government can play in times of crisis. I've been very so interesting to see the innovations that are occurring and how quickly they occurred. I was part of the walleye tank that I know you were part of, and Mayo Clinic, University of Minnesota, Medical Alley. We hosted about COVID-19 innovations back in May, and just phenomenal applications of new technologies that were being launched to address COVID-19. I know there was another pitch event recently with the UEL and Generator, with another pitch event with COVID-19 innovations, but just amazing to see how people have pivoted so fast to address this problem and finding innovative solutions to solve it. And I think my third thing in the last 6 months is just seeing the people step up and the organizations step up to better serve our startup community. Co-working spaces, entrepreneurial support organizations are suffering themselves. Your revenue model, Jamie, has been turned upside down and inside out. Yet you continue to look at how do you better serve your community and how do you best serve your entrepreneurs and your members. And that's phenomenal. I mean, that is really when your own organization is hurting, you are still putting that entrepreneur and your community first. And so I applaud you and others that continue to serve in that manner.
Well, thank you. It's certainly challenging time for everyone. But I'm trying to flip that script a bit and saying it's also an amazing time for opportunities. I think, sometimes it takes something so challenging in our society to really create something new and something good. Here in the Rochester area, we're seeing the identification of maybe there's a different way to work for our largest employers, and thinking about like you were saying with the walleye tank. I think for instance, Mayo Clinic has really stepped up. There were a lot of innovative, smart, talented people across the Mayo network all over the country who said, I can tackle this subject. I could try to create something great. And that has, at least from what I'm hearing inside of Mayo, awakened such a spirit of innovation. And I think for many years that was sort of looked at as a positive thing, but it wasn't supposed to be the main focus. But what I've heard more and more is, it's really reignited a spirit of innovation around helping people. And that's, I think, in our community tends to trickle then outside the walls of Mayo into our community. And it's been fantastic to see and hear all the amazing things that I think will, in many ways, become our local companies of the future. That's what gets me really excited.
They've just, I don't mean to interrupt.
No,
No,
go ahead.
A recent stat just from June to mid-July was an increase of 21% of new business filings in Minnesota. And back in 2009 with the last recession, it was only 16%. So I am hopeful. I mean, history shows that this is when a lot of new businesses and new ideas are launched.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the conditions just become right, whether unfortunately you're displaced from your current position, or things like, you know, the real estate, real estate tends to get a little bit cheaper for renting space and things like that. And so we've seen time and time again that the positive of an economic setback or a recession is usually the creation of these new enterprises, which many create become the next big companies of a local region, or perhaps a global company, which would be super exciting to see. So speaking of future, what is your vision for sort of entrepreneurship in Minnesota in the next, say, 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. Right now, let me just kind of start where we're at today with Launch Minnesota, if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Three different focus areas. So if you are a startup listening to this, we want to help increase access to capital through our grants, through our angel tax credit, working with our private sector investors. The second is we want to build a collaborative statewide network to help startups at every stage of their business journey. And then the third is to develop entrepreneurial talent by ramping up lean startup education and access to mentors and other expertise. So clearly my vision for the future would be that Minnesota would lead in the nation as a leader in innovation, right? We have all the components, we just need to be a little bit louder about it. We have amazing higher ed schools providing entrepreneurship training and science and tech training. We have such a concentration of Fortune 500 companies here in Minnesota, Fortune 1000 companies in Minnesota. We have a strong work ethic here in Minnesota. And it's a great place to be. Our lifestyle is good. So we have all the components. We just need to continue to foster that and build on our strengths.
Yeah, I definitely think too that one thing you touched on was, attracting talent. And I think we have a lot of talent here, don't get me wrong, but I think it takes sort of, I noticed there's been a couple of people that have moved into Rochester who have been out, say, in Silicon Valley or in Boston, and they bring so much. They bring so much experience and understanding, and it can help us really see where we want to go because they've lived in a similar environment. Not to say that, again, I never say I want to be the next Boston. I never say I want to be the next Silicon Valley, but it's great to have those people become a part of our community. And I think I was the first one to say, and I don't know if I'll be right or wrong. Probably we'll find out in the next couple of years, but I
Okay.
think there's a lot of people who realize that they don't need to be in Silicon Valley. And that's, partially due to COVID and remote work. They don't really need to be there to be successful. And so they're starting to look at coming back to the Midwest. They're starting to look at opportunities that are springing up in the Midwest because now we have, funding and definitely not funding that's available in the Valley and things like that, but you're starting to see more and more ways that people can, and stories of ventures that become very successful here in the Midwest. So I think I think we'll see an influx of people moving sort of back to the Midwest is my guess. Partially, I think they felt that just from sort of the raw materials you needed to be successful as an entrepreneur, it wasn't here. I think as more and more people come, they're going to find that, I think that was here. It was here all along. It just wasn't refined yet. We didn't mine it. Wow, this is such a bad analogy. But bringing together their insight with the raw materials that we have here, I think will create something new, something exciting. And that's always my vision, is just, trying to get all these ingredients together and kind of stirring them around and adding a spark, and boom, amazing things happen. And I really see that as, another positive that may come out of the COVID situation that we've had for the last 7 months now. Oh my gosh.
Right. And in every successful state or country that is known for their innovation, government does play a role. And I think the way that we're so neutral, as I shared earlier in the podcast, right? Our success is your success, right? If we can lift up your organization or the businesses in the Rochester area, that's a success for the state. So, as you think about, as you said, this melting pot and all these people with the talent here in Minnesota, I think one of our key goals for Launch Minnesota right now too is being that connective tissue. Connecting. We have a tremendous amount of talent, as you said. It's just still being coordinated and needing to break down some of those silos to be a little bit more collaborative. So entrepreneurs in our businesses know where those on-ramps are to access these great people. So I totally agree with your theory. I think people, we have what we need here in Minnesota, and people will be continuing to move here and stay here. I talk to them every day, and they're happy to be here and investing their dollars here. But there's always room to improve, and there's always room to grow. And so that's what we're keeping focused on, and as how we can continue to make Minnesota even better moving forward.
Great. So you have 2 questions left in my interrogation session here. Okay. They're my 2 favorite questions. So first one, what is one thing that people may not know about you?
All right. Something that might be somewhat unique, and maybe why I like technology and new medical innovations, was when I was a child, I'm in the medical books because I was the first child to have a pericardium tap.
Wow.
So the liquid around my heart was solidifying, and I was too weak for surgery. And so I was the first child in the nation to have a pericardium tap. And luckily it was fluid enough that they were able to drain the liquid. And, I won't tell you how many years later, but I'm still here to talk about it. So.
Wow. So your medical roots in Minnesota run pretty deep.
Yes. So that would be one thing that, kind of an interesting tidbit maybe.
Yeah, I had no clue. So that's what we're trying to bring out in this podcast. We're trying to
medical innovations. I benefited from it firsthand.
Amazing. Last question. And I always say you can't say Collider or me, because that's probably, when you're being interviewed, that's the natural inclination. But who is doing great work right now that supports entrepreneurs in our region? And for you, the state, but maybe isn't broadly known?
Well, that is a hard question for me, Jamie. And to say one person, that would be really difficult. I have had the pleasure of working with so many fascinating people, and people that are really so mission driven and doing incredible things. And that in African proverb that I love, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And it takes a lot of people to do that. I guess I would say, I would say our state leadership right now, if I could even just say that, we have Commissioner Grove and Deputy Commissioner Kevin McKinnon that have really been advocates for supporting early stage entrepreneurs in our startup community. And they, were able to get bipartisan support and the support of our governor to focus on that. And so their voices inside our state are very important and appreciated. And it's because of them and their leadership that Launch Minnesota exists.
Great. So where can people find you? How do they get in contact with you?
Any way they'd like. Email, website. I'm always reachable and always have time for whoever has questions, ideas, concerns. The more people I talk to, the better our product will be, right? The better our services will be. I need to hear what the concerns are from everyone around the state. so I can best advocate and make sure we have the right programs and services in place to serve.
Great. I could definitely add to that by saying that Neela's been a phenomenal person that I can reach out to and instantly get, a response. And it's just been great having you in the position that you're in now. And you're still in Red Wing, really, but it seems like, I guess it's probably a COVID thing, right? We seem so far away from each other. And I just hope that somehow we can figure this thing out and get back to being in person very, very soon, because I would love to sit down and chat with you in person. So
I
thank you
agree.
so much, for taking the time to be with us today here on Ecosystem North and sharing your story. And really just thanks for what you do for our state. I think that's one of the purposes behind this podcast, is to really say thank you on behalf of all the people that you've helped. I don't think that we as ecosystem builders sometimes get that thanks. So I will speak for everybody, even though I'm in no position of authority to do that, and just say thank you for all the great work you've done for people here in Minnesota.
Well, I'm very humbled, Jamie. Thank you. And it's like I said, as I kicked off this talk, right? It's a privilege to be able to do this work with people like you and organizations like the Collider. So thank you for the opportunity to share our story with your audience in the region, and thank you for your continued work and servant leadership.
Awesome. Thank you so much.